with me a moment. Looks like it's working this time. Didn't work 2 weeks ago. With me a moment. Okay, I gotta close that window so we don't have the echo. Awesome, awesome. Okay, and I'm just gonna share my little presentation here. And I'm gonna mute my phone. Just got a text just at the wrong moment. Welcome back, everybody, to Friday Night Comics. I'm Michael, subbing for Tom tonight. SAW is a 501c nonprofit with online courses. You can see what we have to offer at learn.sawcomics.org. We've got a bunch of winter courses coming up. Beth Tremblay's Well on Your Way, Making Graphic Memoir. We've got Jess Rollifson's Bootlegger's Guide to Nonfiction. Elise Dietrich's Procreate for Comics. I also met Elise in 2020 at the Graphic Novel Intensive, and Do-It-Yourself Publishing with Sarah Maloney next time at Friday Night Comics, but I have something covering. It's going to be Maureen Burdock, who did the graphic memoir Queen of Snails. Jess's course Bootlegger's Guide to Story is starting Wednesday, January 17th. Again, it's a 4-session course. You can find out more at learn.sawcomics. Beth Tremblay's course is 12 weeks, Well on Your Way, graphic memoir intensive. Beth is great if you've ever worked with her. If you've never met her before, I always learn so much from her. And an introduction to Procreate with Elise. If you are starting to work digitally, or you have an iPad, you have Procreate, but you don't quite know how to use it for comics yet, this is the course to take. Again, you can find those courses and more at learn.sawcomics.org. Also, check out Seesaw Comics. I just uploaded something new, actually from oh my God, I'm having trouble with human language lately. But we've got so many people from the SAW community work here that is updated regularly. Check that out at, I think it's seesawcomics.org, or you can find it. By the way, SAW survives from tuitions and donations from people like you. If you donated tonight, thank you very much. That helps fund free events like this and many other, and helps pay the artists who lead these Friday night workshops. And you can also support SAW at paypal.me/comicsworkshop or on our Patreon account. Boom. Or consider becoming a sustaining member as a way to support SAW, its mission, and all we do for the comics community. Share your work on social media with the hashtag Friday Night Comics and at Comics Workshop. Join us for free anytime at the SAW sharing site, members.sawcomics.org. That's kind of like our own little neck of the social media woods. Please, no inappropriate speech or imagery, no trolling or hate speech or explicit language. Keep it PG-13. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's workshop. And no, that was last time. Forgot to update that. Okay. And I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you, Yasmeen. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much. I did a workshop last year, or well, 2022, December. So that was like a big highlight for me. So I'm very happy to be back. Can you all see my screen? Okay. So all right. So I'll just do a quick introduction of like who I am and what credentials I have. Who am I to tell you what rules to break? So my name is Yasmeen. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in San Jose and I currently live in Oakland. So I am from the Bay Area and live in the Bay Area, and I'm very Bay Area focused. I love the Bay, and we have a small but like mighty Bay Area group of artists that work and live here. So we make comics and we're, as much as putting it on the scene. But I got my MFA at Cornell University in visual arts. It was very much fine arts oriented. So I went into it kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, and it kind of came out at the other end of comics, which was something I had grown up, and it was a very immediate form of art making for me that I thought, well, maybe I should make painting, something that seems a little bit more higher, like it seemed like the easy answer, but I often learned that the easy answer is probably the right answer. So some background of me. I worked at Silver Sprocket, which is a publisher in the Bay for a bit. And I also worked in animation, specifically at Netflix Animation. I worked on a show called Blue Eye Samurai in production. So I've had a little bit of hands in a few things. I've taught a comics course at the BFA at CCA, which is California College of the Arts, which is based in San Francisco. So I would call myself a comic artist. I'm getting more comfortable, getting myself in that category. I made a comic in 2022 called Death Bloom, which won an Ignatz, which was really awesome. Is like a big dream coming true. So that's me. So rules, like let's break them. But then what happens if I'm deceiving you? So I think one thing that's really great about rules is that we can use rules to our benefit. So I think rules can often be kind of constrictive, right? Like if I tell you to do something a certain way because I think it's the right way, those are rules that are very constrictive. But if we create our own discipline or set of rules for ourselves, maybe we can try to find ways in which we can be as subversive with the rule. So I'll kind of go into that a bit more, but we are breaking rules, but we're breaking rules by using rules. So I am not a con artist. I will convince you at the end of my slideshow. So I wanted you guys to kind of ponder of like, what are some rules in comics? So I'm going to escape so I can see the chat. If you guys wanted to put in the chat, like what are some rules that you can think of in comics? Nice lettering. It's a good rule. Using panels, avoiding tangents, the 180 rule. Yeah. Readable lettering, sequential forward. Yeah, these are great ones. Staying inside the lines. Not too many close-ups. Even gutters, finishing them. It's a good one. Characters should be consistent. Yeah, these are great rules. Yeah, backgrounds are important too. So those are all great rules. I think like as we ponder them, like let's try to think of these rules that are kind of in our head. So I ask you, like, when you're considering the rule, what is the purpose of the rule, right? And the purpose could be communicating something clearly. Maybe it's something that's been conceived because it's been done frequently, right? At the end of the day, comic making is something that is an image making format, right? It's images that, like, if you look at the earliest depictions of any art from most humans is like these cave drawings, which in some way you can say is a comic, right? Like it's just image-based storytelling. So, we go from there to then being like, as you said, like close-ups are bad, right? Like too many close-ups is like, we're how many steps did we get till we get there, right? And the other thing I want you to think about with rules is like, how does it help you or possibly hinder you, right? I think sometimes I found myself when I was making comics or approaching the idea of comic making, I had a set of rules in my head of like what would make a good comic and what would make a bad comic, right? And sometimes I felt like that could stop me from wanting to make one in the end. I don't know if you guys feel the same. So let's discuss some rules. So before we discuss some rules, I'm going to do this exercise. I did this in my class. I made it a bit faster and simpler. We're going to draw some quick comics. So if you've ever done like figure drawing, try to think of this as like I'm not asking you to do these in 20 seconds, but try to think of this as a warm up in which that I'm going to give you fast gesture poses that are just prompts that we're going to draw together very quickly. And it's meant to be sketches, it could be thumbnails, it could be stick figures. It does not need to be a finished and good comic. And I'm not even asking, we can share at the end when we get to the very end of the course. And, we can share them, but this is more for you. Kind of think of it as a warm up. So I saw people talking about speech bubbles. So I think speech bubbles is like one of the things I think of the most with comics. I think it's such a unique form of depicting language that comics is unique for, right? Like if you were to put like comics on a pin, right? Like pin it down, I would think it'd be like a speech bubble, right? Because it's so emblematic of comic making. So there are certain different types of speech bubbles that can communicate different information. There's a thought speech bubble, which I love, like a way to depict someone's thoughts, like such an abstracted idea we universally accept, right? Like this little cloud means thoughts, right? Different speech bubbles have, all these different types of meanings. And then all speech bubbles kind of usually generally have a tail. So the tail is coming out of the character's mouth. And so that communicates which character is speaking or which character isn't speaking, or how can we like kind of overlay different dialogue together. So with each rule that I'm talking about, I'm going to put a little blurb of like, what happens if you break this rule, right? So I'm telling you that to create dialogue, that it needs to come out of the character's mouth, right? But what happens if you don't do that? When you do that deliberately, it would make the dialogue ambiguous of who it's coming from. So maybe that has meaning for your narrative, right? Maybe the character like has a thought that is outside of everything, right? It's something so large. Maybe it's the climax of the story and just like the words hope are on the top of your panel, right? Like maybe that's not coming from them, maybe it's coming from everyone around them, but the ambiguity maybe can help your narrative. And one thing that is I like to say is like it's okay to confuse your audience. I think often of course we want to be clear and have people understand what we're trying to say, but if your point is to confuse and have people kind of like look at it a little longer, be like, wait, what just happened, right? Like if that's done deliberately, it can, help for a compelling narrative. So first exercise. So I'm going to ask you guys to sketch a 2-panel conversation with a minimum of 3 speech bubbles, and we're going to do it in 5 minutes. So I'm going to do it alongside with you. I'm going to share my iPad. Give me one sec. All right. Cool. Can you see my iPad screen all right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. So as a reminder, we have 5 minutes and we're going to do a 2-panel comic that's a conversation with a minimum of 3 bubbles. So
Do you want me to time it so you can concentrate on drawing?
sure. Yeah, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, 5 minutes starting now. Walter wonders if we should break the rules.
This one, for these, I would ask you to keep to the rule. So just do any form of speech bubbles. And it doesn't need to be characters, just that the speech bubbles are there. So
Nikki. We're doing a quick exercise. Just came in late. I'm just catching her up.
Sure.
Two panels, a two-panel conversation with a minimum of three dialogue. Uh, yes, of course, Tom. And this is quick. We're just doing it in 5 minutes, and you only miss like a minute and a half. Actually, we're at the midpoint, so you've got 2 minutes and 40 seconds, everybody. So you should probably be moving to the second panel. Got another minute and a half to wrap it up.
Thanks for keeping time.
It's hard to do all the things. Got the last 30 seconds, so try to wrap it up. It's funny because I'm not drawing, because I can't draw and guest host. 5 minutes feels like a long time. When
I
I
know.
am drawing, it's like, what? That was 5 minutes?
I need more time.
All right, that was 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So pencils down again. If you feel like you want to try these prompts again, if this time limit is too taxing, just you can write these prompts down. And I like to think of them as good exercises before getting into something. So I kind of went meta with it. It was like, does a thought bubble count as speech? Because it does, but you're not saying anything. So this is mine. Gonna stop sharing my iPad and go back to the slides. All right. So the next sort of rule that I think that a few people were talking about is panels. So again, like as much as like a speech bubble, there are a few things that obviously there's no real shared definition of comics. There's so many variation, but for the most part, a lot of comics have panels. So I like to think, as I've described them here, is that they're segmenting image, right? So they're scenes in an interesting way that we'll go into a gutter a bit later. But they're boxes that segment images. It's not like as if there's a whole image and I put a bunch of panels and segmented the image, but it's images in sequential order, right? That are boxed up. So since we're cutting up images and we're putting this kind of frame around it, or a bow, let's say, the shapes can vary and they also have a composition to them, right? So panels can flow and some panels cannot flow, right? Some panels can feel maybe repetitive, or they can feel confusing. So I got this from online, and I think it's just like, I don't understand the stuff at the bottom, but just mostly look at the images that are on the top of just different types of paneling, right? So if you break the rule of paneling, right? So if you don't do any panels, right? So by the end, I'll show you some examples of that. It kind of leaves room for you to do weirder stuff, right? So a whole page, if there are no panels, we could do a spread, right? We could do a background, we could do an establishing shot. But what I'm asking of like a no paneling is, imagine if you made the same comic and just like took the panels off, right? Well, what kind of things could you do? And something that I also wrote down is like ambiguous paneling. So using something that isn't a rectangle, using maybe circles. I had a student do this comic that I still think about, where they had sort of a creature looking at someone through a shower drain, and the panels were circles because it was the circles of the shower drain. So it's like something like that could evoke a greater meaning. You're breaking the rule, quote unquote, of square panels. Let's say that's the rule, by doing some sort of storytelling device. And the other thing is you can do a ton of panels, right? Like if you segment a image into so many pieces, it becomes really anxious, right? Something is really tight and constricting of that. But think about that in like, let's say in like a horror comic or something that's suspenseful, and there's a knife chase with someone, right? You want to have all these different angles and maybe have like the sweat beads of the character that can induce the anxiety that that the character might be feeling. So by breaking kind of the conventions of, these panels need to be very beautiful and they need to flow together and they always need to be, smartly put, right? Like if we try to break the rules, we can kind of do these things that can, of course, lend itself to the work itself. So that's kind of my spiel on paneling. So again, we'll have another kind of warm up. So again, sketch a 2-panel comic with a unique paneling choice. So if that's a bit vague for you, you could do circles, you could do triangles, you could do no panels, you could do maybe your panels are like backwards, maybe your panels are overlapping, if that helps with some prompts. But you can, of course, do whatever feels best for you. So again, we'll have 5 minutes for this. And again, it's a sketch. It can be thumbs. It does not need to be refined. This is more for you than it is for the end.
So anything that's not a square would
And
be
it's not a square or rectangle. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. So I will share my iPad again.
Right. And another 5 minutes starting now.
Great.
And I'll monitor the chat in case any questions come up.
Thanks.
I was going to ask you quickly, Yasmeen, do you think
Sure.
before figuring out the panel shape,
Mhm.
start with the story idea for an exercise like this, or do you start with the panel shape?
I try to think of like what I would do for the panel shape or idea. Like for the one that I'm about to do, I like the idea of the panel being hand. So I'm just going to go about doing that kind of exercise. So maybe
Oh,
you could go
cool.
about it of like, my panels are going to be triangles, or my panels are going to be circles. And then maybe you can try to think of like what would make sense if the panels were circles. Maybe if they're circles, it could be bubbles, right? Like that could be the context of the story. If it's triangles, maybe it can be something technological. So I'd maybe lead with the panel first.
Okay. It's two unique panels, Lenny. Lenny just wants to know the rest of the prompt.
Yeah, so it'll be two unique panel choices. So it can be a two-panel comic with two unique panels. Yeah.
And remember, these are just warm-ups. They can be really rough. Now we're at the midpoint, so we have another 2.5 minutes. I'm just chuckling at you. I'm just watching you draw, Yasmeen. We've got just about 45 seconds left.
I cut one of the rules, which was the 180 rule, as an exercise, just because I wanted to get to the last one. But it was cool to see someone mention the rule, because I think it's usually like a animation storyboarding principle, but I think it works really well for comics too. So
It's a filmmaking. Well, I
Mhm.
guess it applies to live action
Yeah,
and that's 5 minutes.
cool. All right, so this was mine. As I mentioned, I thought of the idea of using hands as like a um, paneling device, which is felt very smarmy for myself. So that's what this is. Um, stop sharing, share back, and this is our last sort of quick exercise. And we're going to do the kind of bigger assignment at the end. So this is our last one. So the gutter. So it can mean a few things, right? Like there is the definition of the gutter of being the time elapsed between this is from Scott McCloud, as I'm sure that most of you have maybe read or seen. If you've been in these workshops for a bit, I'm sure people have brought him up. But the gutter can also describe the what happened between this, right? But for the sake of right now, I'm talking about the literal blank space between the panels. So the fact that the panels are like this, and there's this white space between, and they're not like this, right? So for this purpose, that's in which I'm defining it as the white or blank part between panels. So if you were to not do that, it can kind of feel like a lot of information to digest at the same time. I think the gutter, as much as it helps show kind of like a pause between the two moments, it also like segments images in a informative way, right? So if you imagine these two panels kind of married together, it would still evoke maybe the same sense of time, but there's like you're kind of jumping from each image is a little faster. So if there are no gutters, it can be very heavy to read, right? It can also create confusion of what to read in what order. So if there's a lot of panels that are all connected together, it can often feel like, of course, we have a understanding of how things should be read, but maybe the putting it together might change that a bit. You can also think about if you break the rule of the gutter and like overlap images, right? You can overlap moments. So maybe that would work again for whatever narrative or work you're trying to make of maybe these two scenes or moments or characters have overlapping themes or ideas. And it can create, it can break time a little bit. I think comics do this really interesting thing of depicting time. So try to think of as like more time fun, like messing around with time. So there are comic artists that work purely with no gutters, meaning there are no spaces between. So at the end, I have some examples of that as well. So yeah, this one I think is a little bit of an easier rule. It's very, just blank spaces between panels. So last exercise before we go into the greater exercise. And after this, you'll be so warmed up and ready that you'll be just, going super fast. So this one, since it's a bit of an easier prompt, I would say, it would be sketch a 4-panel comic with no gutters. So you could do an more unique panel, but I would, just because of the time constraint, I would just think of it as like four rectangles or 4 squares that are just together. So I'll draw alongside with you and we'll kind of see how that works.
So that means like about a minute and a half for each panel.
Yeah.
Okay. Starting now. Mm-hmm. Exactly, Jack.
Yeah. So the shape would be a comic with no gutters. Yeah, I like what Allison said, where it is a good solution if panel order isn't important. I think it'd be fun if you can imagine different directions. It's very hard, but I think it can be really fun. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, I was muted this whole time. That was time. Sorry.
Oh,
I
all
was
good.
calling out the time and forgot that I had muted myself.
That's totally fine. All good. Give you guys a sec to finish up. Um, I'll start going to the last sort of bits. So give you guys time to adjust. Okay, so now that we've thought of some rules, this is sort of my last sort of exercise for you to think of is what are some subversive rules you could use? So when I say subversive, like what does it mean? It kind of alludes to what I was saying at the beginning of, right, there's a lot of rules, right? Like around comics, as I described, that were kind of confining for me, like that I had to have a certain set of things in order to be a comic artist or can make a comic. But what I found that would be a better way to look at it and help me feel more productive is what is a rule that I can create for myself to sort of confine myself, because I think with comic and art making, there's so many things you can do, right? So sometimes it can be helped to create your own rule and take back the kind of autonomy and have more creativity with it. So I'll give some examples, and at the end, I'll have a set of prompts that you can choose from. So just try to have it in the back of your mind, like what would be a subversive rule. So one thing that I brought up was panels. So here are some artists and comics that kind of use paneling in a unique or kind of rule way. So Homunculus is by Joe Sparrow, and the comic is from the perspective of a computer that doesn't move. And so the panel size and perspective of the comic stays the same for the whole comic. So it never moves. The camera, like if you think of a panel as a camera, like the camera will never move. It stays exactly where it is for the whole comic, and it shows the passage of time. That's an interesting way to kind of think of a comic, right? Like if I were to keep my comic in the same exact place for the whole comic and the panel size is the same, how can I make a compelling and interesting narrative? Um, and then I also thought of Blind Alley by Adam D'Souza. So kind of reminiscent of like old school cartooning, like the Peanuts, right? There's 4 panels, and what kind of stories can you tell in 4 panels, right? I think often there's this idea in which like creating a 300-page graphic novel, which is a very big feat that I have not done myself, is a very big feat to do. But one thing that I would say is also similarly difficult is creating narratives in short form, like 4 panels that people want to read and are interested in, is really hard. So I think that's kind of why the Peanuts and even the Nancy comics do so well, because they're so limited. And how do you tell a story in 4 panels? And then I also put Bradley of Him by Connor Williamson. There's a lot of really interesting paneling, lack of paneling that Connor does that kind of lead a narrative. So you can kind of see it's like someone running on a street, but like these hills and valleys of the drawing kind of segment the image without any panels being done to kind of evoke the passage of time that this person is running through this entire landscape. But rather than giving us a bunch of panels of that, we get this larger image that still feels segmented. So technically there are no panels in this one, but it still feels paneled. And then the other thing that I was thinking about is dialogue. So we talked about speech. What happens if there is no speech, right? Like a lot of the comics that we think of, right, as I mentioned, like a speech bubble, what happens if you take that away, right? What are the kind of images that you can put together to create a narrative? So two examples that I thought of was Grip by Lale Westmond, where there's no dialogue in the entire comic. And there's some sound effects, but there is a narrative that is being told that's very abstracted, and there's no speech, but it becomes a very compelling and drawing narrative. I also thought of the Migration series, which is not what I would traditionally call a comic. I think they're a set of prints, but they tell a story of migration through a series of images with no dialogue. And so in some ways, I kind of like, by proposing these quote unquote rules, I kind of think of these as rules to kind of expand your lexicon of like what qualifies as a comic, right? It really is whatever you want it to be. Like you are your own artist and you're the person who sets your own rules. Like no one should, kind of define you. You define you. So that's why I put that in there. So both of these have no dialogue. And then I talked about the gutters. So these are comic artists that don't do any gutters. So the last just sort of warm up we did of no gutters, right? So I think Michael DeForge is a really great example of someone who doesn't necessarily use gutters that often. The images are, stuck together, right? And they kind of create these claustrophobic worlds. And I think that's kind of purposeful. So this is Familiar Face by Michael DeForge. And then this is Baby by Patrick Kyle, which again, I put this as an example too, because it isn't the window plane that we did before, but it's these kind of segmented pieces that are overlapping in interesting ways. Kind of like, as someone said in the chat, is like, you don't really know where to start and where to go, and I think that can be useful. So, let me, one sec. All right, so we're going to make a comic with one of the following rules. So I put these as prompts just to help people, because I think when I give the idea of like a vague, I'm gonna plug in my laptop. What's that? When I give the idea of something subversive, I think it can, basically I want to give you guys more time to just kind of make than kind of think of something. So that's only why I put these here. If you find these not interesting and you already have a subversive rule that you've thought of and you want to go about doing it, I'm all good for that. I just put these here as kind of like one to follow, because I feel like just grabbing and doing it might help you just get started. So I put no dialogue, no characters, no panels, only one perspective. So the comic doesn't change the setting. A fixed panel size. So something like Adam Souza or even like Watchmen. No gutters. I put new characters twice. Maybe that one I was really excited about. Only spreads. So like a full page panel for each page, quote unquote. So there's no like, I would say only spreads is kind of similar to a children's novel in that way. A backwards narrative. So you start from the end to the beginning, and maybe no narrative. So those are kind of the rules that I thought of, and you can choose one of them for your prompt. So before we start,
Yasmeen, I'm going to make one suggestion that we do it in 10 minutes instead of 15.
Okay.
So we have some time to share, because it's already 7:45.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, we can do it in 10 minutes and we'll share at the end.
I know we're saying 4 panels, 3 panels, as many panels as you want.
As many panels as you want. If you want to do a 1-panel comic or a 4-panel, I think that's fine. I think the only rule, quote unquote, that you're kind of choosing for yourself is one of these following rules. So,
I'm going to put them in the chat too, in case you're having trouble deciding, like Jackie.
okay. All right. So does
And
anyone
then
have?
I'm going to ask one more question. So some people, based on other Friday Night comics, might want a little bit of a firmer prompt to help them get started.
Sure.
Um, what would you suggest for those people?
Um, okay. So if like a certain prompt to go into that, um,
Yeah,
you could do
something.
something similarly to that I've been doing, where it could be just you discussing the idea of how you feel about rules. So if you're doing something with no characters and you want to just do speech bubbles, you could do speech bubbles about how you feel about rules. Like what are some rules that have kind of been challenges for you or things that you haven't challenged with. So um maybe the idea of rules itself, if that's helpful.
That's great. I know that's going to help some people. Like, where do I
Yeah.
start? Maybe Jackie. Does that
Yeah.
help you, Jackie? Okay. And so I'm starting the 10 minutes now, and I will give you a midpoint warning. And I won't be on mute this time. So,
Sounds good.
and Nikki wants to share first. So I'll remember that, Nikki. That's good to hear, Nikki. Nikki says that thinking about the panel, what the panel shapes implied was a really helpful tool. Betsy. All right, that was the midpoint. You have 5 more minutes. Interesting.
And I originally did this sort of assignment. I did it in my class, and I had the students all think of a rule, and they were under
Mm.
the assumption whatever rule they thought they would be doing. And I had them write it down, and I put it in a hat and randomly find whatever rule. So I remember one of the students was like, please, I don't want backwards narrative. Please don't give it to me.
So,
Um, and so uh, I was trying to think of ways to randomly assign it to people, but of course it's a little bit difficult on Zoom, but that was the original evil scheme of this assignment. Um, and I did it, I like wore a beanie and I like did it in my beanie, and one of my students was like, is that why you wore a beanie today? So that was very
I
fun.
wonder, have you ever done a backwards narrative, but um, draw it in linear, but backwards? Or
Yeah, yeah, the student that got that actually did something really really cool. They did a time traveling narrative, and they printed it on a 11 by 17 kind of folder. So you could like open it up, and it was the one where, you know, the zine where you put a slit in the middle and you like
uh-huh,
pull accordions out. So
you
you
did
could
a
read it in different ways if you folded it in different ways. So it became kind of like a piece in itself by being printed. So that was kind of how they went about it, which was very creative. So in some ways, I guess it was a narrative, but yeah, backwards.
We've got about a minute left, and then we'll start sharing.
I like that Betsy said it was extremely evil. It was very evil. They liked it in the end, but yeah. Yeah, I think JB would be that the end would come first. So they kind of went about it that way. I would think backwards would be that. I guess you could kind of go backwards and forwards. Yeah, I haven't seen Memento, but I have heard of it where
I think
it's
Memento is like non-linear, but Harold Pinter's play and movie Betrayal, it definitely is backwards. So
yeah,
it sort of deconstructs an affair.
as it goes.
It's great.
Yeah,
Um, okay, so time's up.
cool.
Um, do you want to talk about what you did, Yasmeen, and then we'll open the floor to sharing?
Of course, yeah. So I kind of did the kind of prompt that I talked about, where what happens if I talked about my feelings of rules. So I did no characters and I just did speech. And so I did this little thing of what defines a rule. And ultimately, I want you all to come out of this feeling like the rules that you go about when you're art making is the ones you define for yourself. No one can define that for you. So I think that's kind of my last thoughts on rules. So I
That's
will,
great.
yeah, I'll stop sharing. And
Um,
do
we
you want me to,
usually share by just raising hands.
okay.
Um,
Do
I'm
you
gonna,
want me to also raise my hand? I remember, I don't know if I did that last time or,
yeah, just because that will shoot you to the beginning.
okay.
And I know Nikki was very anxious to go first. Sometimes Zoom lowers people's hands, so I don't see where Nikki went. Where did Nikki? I see Nikki. So we'll go to Nikki first and then Andy, okay? Asked to unmute. Hey Nikki, are you there?
Wonderful. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much. Another good workshop. Um, I just put my hand up because I'd already finished, so I thought, seeing as I've already finished, I
You
will
finished first. Wow.
put my hand up. So, I looked at the rules like no speech bubbles, no gutters. Officially, it's triangle panels, but there's no gutters.
Mhm.
So, this is my comic from
Oh,
today. Where am I? Can anybody hear me?
oh, wow.
And my materials, I've used charcoal, ballpoint pen, ink, white ink, Signio Uniball for the writing. And then these lines, just in case anybody wants to use the technique, is where you just get your eraser and you go shoop, 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 you draw back into the charcoal.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
really cool drawing tool.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's cool you kind of did two roles. You did the triangle and then it's kind of like the narrative could go either way. And there's like no
Mhm.
covers, so you definitely did. I love this. I think it's really smart to think of putting the triangles together to create this image.
Thank you.
Really beautiful.
And you were saying, Nikki, that the idea of using um, non-square shapes, but deliberately to help tell a story that unlocks them.
Oh no, it's when oops, it's when Yasmin, sorry, I don't know if that's how I pronounce your name,
Yeah, that's
but it's
fine.
when you said look at what your panels, when you're going through different shapes, look at what your panels are implying, like circles or bubbles. And then I
Mhm.
thought triangles, it's like a lit corner in a very dark room that's illuminated. And then
Yeah,
instantly I saw this one, and then that just evolved into that one. And so
right.
then it's actually if I was doing it like as a not breaking the rules with no panels, there would probably be a gutter down there.
Yeah. I would honestly,
Uh,
I like that.
I
I
love
like
it like that
that.
though.
Yeah. Yeah. No changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool. All
Awesome.
right, I saw Andy next.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki.
Hey everybody. So just I'll show you one of my warm-ups as context. So I kept using this setup of me and a student asking them if they did their homework. And so I kind of used that throughout the different exercises, which were really great. And so I ended up with this one. So what did I pick? I picked no dialogue, fixed perspective, fixed panel, and no gutter to kind of pull everything together. So it's that kind of moment of uh waiting for inspiration, and I'm just kind of poking around the edges, so then they eventually sort of give in to something. So but yeah, kind of trying to figure out that feeling from without that dialogue. I thought it was sort of like a little bit less, am I being a jerk or are they being lazy? It sort of lets it be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And then the monotony of keeping everything kind of the same as much as possible. It's sort of like the dread of waiting for something to happen, anything to happen, please let something happen. So yeah, so it's kind of fun to play with. But yeah, really cool. I loved the way you took us through each and every one of those things. Really good stuff to chew on. Thanks so much.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I love that you use the no gutters because it kind of feels more claustrophobic. Like the
Yeah.
idea needs to, it needs to come out. You feel the tension. So
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, thank
And,
you.
and I
Thank you.
thought the line of the desk also creates another segment, which is
Yeah, it's sort of like
Mm.
unending landscape, like it just goes
Yeah.
on and on. So yeah,
Very
thanks,
cool.
Michael. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Andy. I see Jules and then Lentil and Allie.
Howdy. Hi. Thank you so much for the workshop. Uh, so for mine, I did the rule as no, no characters. So I kept I hope, don't know how well it's focusing. Not super great. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Great. So I did the text first, and I'll just read it because it's not really that visible. But there's a knock at my door. It isn't a person, just a sound. You ask for a voice without a body. Who's there? So it's like the kind of like knock knock, who's there? Good joke. And I just did sort of like abstract imagery instead of doing characters. So like this like, red for like the knock, and then it's kind of like just a sound. It's like the like music notes sideways, and then the like notes for um rests in music, and then the last one is just like darkness. And then for materials, I've been using these
Oh,
like
cool.
blue and red sketching pencil, or like sorry, marking pencils a lot that are usually used for like grading tests
Oh, no.
for sketching. And it's been just really fun as a like, because it limits me to like 2 colors when I'm doing drawings. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I love the use of like color as its own character in the comic as well, which I think is really
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Jules. We have Lentil next, then Allie and Alan.
Hello, I was gonna try to share my screen.
I can do that. Okay.
Okay. Hmm. Okay, so the first one was just 3 dialogues. I was like, oh, I guess you can't really respond, so I just had the character kind of their the way they're emoting be the forward response, I guess. That was that one. The panels, no, I don't know. I just made these loopy panels that I was watching a hound dog, and I was just thinking about the way everything is flowing for them. There are no squares for that dog. So it's kind of like a scented panel. No gutters. I don't know. Just looking around. It seemed like more like a space than like a picture on its own. So that's why I did that.
Very cool.
And then there's not really any narrative, and it's only a single panel, and it's just the story of being in a comic again, I guess.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of them. I think that like I love the thought of like, well, if there's only 3 speech bubbles, can I use emotion to be an additional sort of communicator? So that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that. And I see Allie and then Alan. Hi, Alan. Oh, I didn't ask you to unmute. Okay, hang on. Where's give me 1 second here. Oh gosh. I think I need to unspotlight you and then respotlight you. Seem to be having a little you know what? Let me move to Alan and then I'll go back to you and I'll do it correctly.
Okay, sorry about the difficulty there. I'm also going to share my screen if that's okay. Let me see if I can. Yes, okay. So, 'cause I always do mine digitally, I guess. So here's the first one, which, yeah, I don't know, just kind of silly. Are people talking or are we a vase? What a strange question. It's all in your point of view. And then the second one with the weird panels. Do you ever wonder how it would look if we could see through each other's eyes? I don't think it would look that different. So the panels, of course, form the eye. And then the third one, oops, there we go. I don't know, 4 panels immediately made me think of suits of cards. So I just have the characters very sketchy since it was in a rush. But yeah, no diamond could shine as brightly as she, nor spade dig so deep as my longing. Alas, I fear I've lost my heart to her. Join the club. Uh, and the last one I kind of did no narrative, no dialogue, and well, and no panels, although I guess the rooms are kind of sort of like panels, but it's supposed to be, I know it's so sketchy and small, it's hard to tell what's going on. It's supposed to be kind of some investigators investigating a haunted house and missing all the ghosts, and there are little vignettes going on in each room, but again, with the small size and how sketchy it is, I'm sure it's kind of hard to see what's going on. Like here, the ghost is reading a book and he just sees the floating book. And here we have a guy going up the stairs while a ghost is somehow going upside down under the stairs, etc. But anyway, so again, no narrative, no dialogue, and no panels unless you count the rooms. So that's what I did. Okay.
Yeah. You grabbed a bunch of rules. You were that looks great. I think the exercisers are so funny. They're so creative. Thanks so much.
All right, now let me find out. There's Allie. Okay. Now I'm doing it in the right order. Sorry about that.
Great. Okay. Hi. I wanted to give a little anecdote. This is my second workshop, and I came last week, and I really enjoy this because my best friend and I went to school together, and she moved to Virginia, but we've come here together the past 2 weeks because I'm still in Florida, so we can do it together. And I think that's really nice and fun. So I'm only gonna share I'm only gonna share the last one, and I'm gonna use my I need to
Yeah, you may want to take the background blur off.
how do I do that?
Oh gosh, I could barely figure out how to unmute you.
Uh,
I think
It
it's
might
in
be
settings.
it might work. No.
if you go to stop video and if you go to that little triangle up, it says blur my background. So maybe yeah.
Nice. Thank you. So both of my roommates just recently had COVID. We're all free of COVID now, but it made me think about how many things I touch all the time and then touch my face and like all the germs. So I did a little germs of the day comic and all the things I touch and my little handprints on all the things and whatnot. So I have my phone, a bunch of doors, my computer, my work computer, my face, my shoes, and then a little Lysol can at the bottom to kind of frame everything. There's no dialogue and there's a character, but it's kind of like passive character through the hands and kind of breaking the panels and everything. So I really enjoyed this workshop. I thought it was very fun. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I love that. It's so smart. I love that you guys did multiple rules. It's very challenging. I think I love the like hands imprinted on all of the images. That's really fun. And I love that you're doing this with your friend. It's so sweet.
I also like the title or main caption kind of unifies it, helps with the storytelling. And I was thinking of Ellen's Ghost House too, that if you just had a title, it might bring everything together.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. We have Marlene next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine and Michael. It's always lovely to get a challenge like today. I was always, not sure of how to do a silent comic, but I think I sort of got it today, and I came up with this little story. I was in the process of writing the title Weirdos. And so in the first panel, you have two characters, a mushroom and a chandelier walking about. There is no relationship really, and the jagged bubbles are there for a purpose, for the reader to put in their own interpretation. And so what happened to me, I thought, well, she's asking the chandelier, what are you on about? What's all this? And he says, well, can't you see I'm burning myself out? And then in the second panel, there's a gutter. And the chandelier suddenly changed into a burnt out skeleton. Again, no sense in the narrative. I just sort of thought, oh, well, what's next? Just draw something like came up with a skeleton. And so the skeleton suddenly has a voice talking, which is over here, and says, get on with it. What are you on about? And suddenly the skeleton says, let me take out my twin telescope. It's a Samsung model, solar powered. And I'm going to have a look and see what's out there. So it goes into the bottom panel with no separation. And this one points to another weirdo. He's dressed like a butler, very well dressed with a very long neck. I use different shapes. As you can see, a very abstract body. And he's walking his pets, a boxed cat, and the cat is walking a mouse. So, yeah, the skeleton is saying, hey, what's this? What's going on there? And then suddenly, when he looks this way, he sees something in a triangular pot growing. It's a Mexican, some sort of a cactus doing a maraca dance. Those are the notes, singing away. And then it goes back to her and she says, yeah, see, I thought he is a magician. However, he's very fiery, isn't he? Causing all these different things. And so the rules I am applying here is vacant speech bubbles, jagged speech bubbles with a purpose, no gutters in parts. The narrative is really all mixed up and makes no sense. Using different shapes and a little bit of innovation to show that I'm thinking of sustainability of the solar-powered telescope, and then throwing in a variety of characters. I know it doesn't make sense, but I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I love the characters. I love the little mushroom with the bow tie. I love the idea of using like a lens and the lens is guiding the viewer and the character. That's really, really smart. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very cool, Marlene. Thanks for sharing. I have Rachel next, then Jackie and Gail.
Hi, thanks for this
Rachel.
workshop. This was so fun. I wanted to share one of the warm-ups and the final one. So I use the 3 speech bubble one, and I have the character off stage with me saying, "Hang on, buddy," and my dog Bliff saying, "But it's up to me to expedite dinner." And then he's kind of looking down and saying, "She was better at this. We
No.
lost her." And then I was thinking about rules. I was thinking about food rules and how the tyranny of them. So this is my bag of mini marshmallows, and the marshmallows are saying, "We're just for hot cocoa. Yeah, no snacking, but we're squishy. We're not even vegetarian. You can't resist. And delicious. You shouldn't eat so much sugar." And then the stethoscope is my doctor yesterday saying to me, "You should just change your behavior." And then my therapist is saying, "No food rules." And then I ended up with the dead marshmallow.
That marshmallow is the best. I feel like that's just, it says so much. Yeah. I like that silent moment of like meditation with that ending. That's great.
Thanks.
That's awesome, Rachel. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Hey, Jackie.
Hi. All right. Now this is really it might be pushing the PG rule, but I'm going to show a couple of my warm-ups here. This is I decided not to use any characters, but damn, that is really messed up right there. Who would use a blow-up doll for dibs? And dibs in Chicago, it is very apropos right now because we're having a big snowstorm, and dibs is like when people just put objects in their parking spaces that they dug out on the street to sort of claim them. And they can be anything from chairs to, that. And then this was my 2-panel one where I'm just, it's a bit meta, but that's.
Can you read the dialogue, Jackie, on the
Oh,
two?
sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, not entirely sure what I should be doing here, but I use the thought bubble as the balloon. The balloon is the panel.
Oh, very cool.
My gutterless one is ridiculous. It's just a dancing baby seal. But this one is it's me. I'm not really sure which rules I'm breaking, but what I did was I drew on top of the panel I drew the panels like nothing, no distance space intentionally left blank, cricket, and it's just me kind of like a giant Godzilla rampaging across, breaking the rules.
Yeah, I love that spread. And I love learning
Thanks.
a little bit about Chicago, about dibs. I did not know that. That's
Yes.
great.
All right.
So, Jackie, I have to ask, because at one point in chat you said you got nothing. What sparked you? What got you through that?
The prompt about Yasmeen's comment about the rules, like in her comic, but also the that prompt really helped me. Like, do yourself like ranting about the rules or whatever. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna take this page over, and that's what I decided to do. Like, forget the rules. I'm gonna just
Yeah,
like Godzilla stomping on Tokyo. I'm just gonna that's how I'm gonna do these panels.
Very cool. Thanks so much,
Thank
Jackie.
you.
We got Gail up next, then Megan, Gail, Edgar, and Lenny. Hi, Gail.
Hi, another great workshop. Thank you, Yasmeen. I felt a little stuck at first because I wasn't sure what my topic was going to be, but it came to me eventually. Okay, so here, this is my first exercise, and you can see I broke the rule of the exercise. You said to do 2 panels with speech bubbles, and I did 3 because I couldn't get all my speech into 2. So I just started by writing about something that happened to me today. I'm an English teacher, and on Fridays, I do poetry Fridays. So I wrote about something I said to my class today after discussing one of the poems. This poem was recommended to me by a student a few years ago. When I first read it, I was totally confused. I thought, there's no way students will get this. But I found that students actually do a great job with it. Your brains are more modern than mine. Exercise number 2, oddly shaped panels. So we were talking about this poem called They May Love All That He Has Chosen and Hate All That He Has Rejected by Tracy K. Smith, which is a poem about the victims of hate crimes, in which the poet imagines what the victims might write in postcards to their assailants. So I did these panels in the shapes of bullets. And I wrote one of the questions that my students came up with, which was, do you think the poet should have asked permission of the families of the victims before she published this poem?
Wow. That's great.
And right here, this is just for panels without gutters. I have some students. This one looks kind of baffled. This one is studying the poem. This one has an idea. She's raising her hand. This is just the poem. Okay, and then this is my final thing. It's kind of big. Okay, and it's just basically students' faces and some of the things that they said. So I'll just read them. Something I noticed about this poem is that even though the writer has split it up into 6 Roman numeral sections, it's really 3 sections told from different perspectives. I notice a theme of forgiveness. Why do you think she had the victims write postcards from famous American landmarks? Do you think the poet is criticizing something? My favorite part was where she wrote, line them up, let us look them in the face. They are not as altogether ugly as we'd like. And then, yes, I like that part too. It's like she's saying they don't look like monsters. They look like ordinary Americans. They look like us.
Wow. Yeah, I love the use of the text as like pointed parts of the comic. There's a comic by Marjane Satrapi. People obviously know Persepolis, but it's called Embroideries, and it's kind of like a diary comic. And you might like it. It's like very text forward, but obviously it reminds me kind of like these moments where there's like little faces to lead you through the text. So
What's the name of it? I love Marjane Satrapi.
yeah, it's called Embroideries.
Embroideries. Thank you.
Yeah, I can spell it in the chat. Marjane Satrapi.
Well, thank you for sharing, Gail. I see Megan next, then Gaia, then Edgar.
Hi. Oh, wow, I can see myself. Can I share my screen? Okay, share screen. I'm gonna do desktop too. So it's open in Storyboard Pro because I just had that open, but I did, am I sharing?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry.
Now
Helps to share. There we go. So I just did it in Storyboard Pro because I had my work open, and I did no gutters and the weird panel shapes. I don't have a lot of backstory. I'm just working on a kid's comic about a tiger. He has very robust self-esteem. This is him. And I really got a lot out of the workshop. I wanted to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Okay, that's it.
This is great. Yeah, I love the kind of like dynamic movement through it. And I think like having no gutters and these dynamic shapes can kind of lead you in so many different directions. Yeah. Thank you.
And it's got such beautiful energy too. It's really
Oh, thank you so much.
fun
I'm
to look at.
flattered.
Thanks for sharing that. And now, Okay. We have Kaya next.
Hi, thank you so much. This was so fun. I also teach comics, so I'm definitely gonna use some of these exercises in my class.
Good.
So yeah. Here we go. Turn the camera around. Okay, so kind of going through it right now. So these are all a little bit angsty, but 2 panels, 3 dialogues. It's all way too much. What do you mean? I'm burnt out at my limit. That's my cat, Frankie. Second warm up, the funky panel designs. We got I feel disjointed, can't keep a thought for more than a moment. Another one arrives. Flash, bang. I'm like, huh? No borders, no borders. I'm just trying to have fun, live life, but shit keeps coming up, keeps me down. I can't be fake happy. Oh, and all of these little scribbly bits were outside of the 5 minutes. I just like have been trying to practice like less white space. So all the main drawing part was done in the time. Well, thank you. I did the final comic on nicer paper because I really want to ink it properly. So I just like quickly came up with this idea of making the word rules, the panel borders, right? So it's like every letter is a panel, I guess. And also no characters. I love no characters, less work, no characters design. What is a rule? Are rules good or bad? Are they meant to be broken? Do you have to learn them first? Some find rules comforting. Others prefer to think outside the box. And I did this a little bit on purpose, like ambiguous reading order, because the think outside the box is outside of the L, right? Very clever. Rules can help, rules can hurt. Who decides the rules? Are rules in your way? Too strict? Too lax? Then you got to turn it upside down. Without them, how do you work? So yeah, I loved this workshop. Like I teach comics at the college level, so a lot of this very like highfalutin conceptual, what are the rules, how can we break them type talk is very much my stuff. I feel like I just did a continuing education credit, so thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Gaia. I love all of those. They're really, really fun. I love the idea of using like the whole word of rules and using that as your like kind of panel device. Thanks for coming.
It just kind of came to me. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm excited to see it inked. I feel like it'll look really great. Yeah.
How are you doing on time, Yasmeen?
I'm all good. I'm good to keep
Like
going.
5 more shares. Okay, we've got Edgar, then Lenny, then Goody Howe, then Victoria.
Well, thank you for hosting, Michael, and Yasmeen. Thank you for the inspiration. Let me show you the warm-ups I did and what I tried to do on each one. First, I have the 43rd century is calling you, and this little character says, but I don't want to go, but he says, too late, we're there. So, so his dialogue is already in the 43rd century. Then I have a character with tears coming out of his eyes, and I've written the dialogue in the tears. Tears for me because you don't love me. Tears for you because you don't love me. And then I have the panels intersecting with no gutter, and the character, it says, no time passes interdimensionally. So in other words, immediately the character is in another dimension. And let me show you the larger piece called In a New York Minute. And what I've done first is I'm writing the introduction kind of in a sort of going all over the page and different styles. Emotions can change in a second. And here's the character saying, he's nice, but there's nothing he can do to make me like him. And we don't have a gutter, but we have a wavy line. And then he says, I got the hotel reservation for you so you don't have to sleep under the bridge. And she thinks, oh, he came through for me. He cares. And then what I've done is I've eliminated the characters, but I have the dialogue. So someone says, and it's actually him, look, the hotel hallway has a bowl of apples. Would you like one for the trip? And then you hear a laughing, ha ha. We're like an international crime family swiping things. And anyway, she does think to herself, he does have a great sense of humor. So the last panel is they're giving each other a little goodbye hug. And he says, have a safe trip back to New York. And she thinks, this one seems special. I'll keep in touch. And then he says, actually, that should be a thought balloon. I think she likes me now. And she says out loud, thanks for taking me to the train station, the beginning.
That's love.
And
Yeah.
so any thoughts on that or any feedback you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first ones that you did were so creative. The idea of using speech bubble tears, like that's awesome. But I think my favorite part in this comic actually is where she comes out of the panel. I feel like that's really, I love that drawing, and I think that's like
Up there.
yeah, that's
Oh,
a great drawing, and I love the intersecting line of the panel that kind of like maybe like segments her thoughts or how she feels. So
oh,
yeah,
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback and insight.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Edgar. We've got Lenny, then Goody Howe, Victoria. Did I not ask you to unmute? Did I screw it up again? Oh, all right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Yasmeen and then I'll go back to you because I don't know. Okay, now I'll go back to you. Ask to unmute. There we go. And I still,
I don't think we can. Yeah. Oh, no,
there
we can.
you are.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
You're all good.
So the first one was the non-conventional panel, and I thought about using like the outline of a body. I didn't fill it in, but I'm thinking like to fill it in with small vignettes of different things happening, like in an arm or in the face or in the hair and the leg. And then I've been thinking about parties and dancing. And so this was the non-square or rectangle prompt. So I used these ovals and did different scenes of people at a party. And then for the final one, I did a backwards narrative. So it starts up here with a kiss and then it goes backwards. It's also a party scene. It goes backwards, they're dancing and the music's playing and she's surrounded by people and the main character sees her.
Wow.
I love that. I love the idea that you're into parties right now. Those drawings are great. Like the motion and gesture you have is like really great. I love the dancing one. It's so
Thank
great.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thanks for the workshop too.
That was awesome. Thank you. And we have Goody Howe next.
Hello.
Hello.
You can hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So the first one isn't very good. For the unconventional panels, I did like hexagons and little bees. And it
Yeah.
says working like a dog. And then the guy's like, bro. And then the title's Busy Bees. And then the other one is an alarm clock. some be very sleepily looking at it, smacking their hand down on it, and then turning over and going back to sleep. And then, yeah, the last one I did was just like objects on the ground, and it's not very clear what any of the objects are. Like that's a couch, but then
I
time
think
was called, and I was like, I'm done. 10 minutes.
I think it's pretty clear. I think that the first ones that you shared are great as well. I love the idea of hexagons for a panel because, you know, that's what they're living in. So that's really smart.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got a lot of likes in the comments. I have to tell you, I always feel that way too. Whenever I show my work, I want to start by saying I want to first apologize for my art, and I'm just telling you, this is a lesson I keep having to learn, and I know you're not asking for this, but um, let people experience it. You know, try not to apologize for yourself. I'm saying this for myself as much as for you. Because
Yeah.
a lot of us feel that way. We have the inner critic. It's just so loud in our heads. But I really liked your drawings, just so you know. Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thanks for sharing.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is my first workshop. My friend Ellie invited me. So I was only able to do the last one because I was actually prepping dinner, but like listening. But I did kind of I think sort of like a only one perspective and no panels. So if you can see this, it's just kind of, I tried to make like it one fluid panel. And so I figured this was kind of like my thought words or my word thoughts. And so they say like, they're like overlapping each other. So it says like, remember when, don't forget. If they say you should have done, I actually think. So it's kind of like all of my thoughts just kind of like interrupting each other and then me looking up at them and trying to figure out which one to pick and focus on. So sorry it's a little blurry, but that's what it looks like.
Oh yeah, that's great. I love the idea.
Wow.
Thought words.
So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for having this. It's super fun.
Yeah, I also love the eyes at the bottom looking up. It's
Thank
such
you.
Thank you.
We've got VDR, VCR, but I can't spotlight you until you come on camera. So let's go to Jessica and we'll go back to VDR. Hi, Jessica.
Thank you for this very fun workshop, everyone, and Yasmeen and Michael for hosting. My very first exercise was the 2 panels with 3 bubbles. So in the first panel, I have me with a speech bubble, and then my daughter responding like kind of like off camera. So, you know, I left the little triangle open without her in it. And then that's me with a thought coming out. So the first one says, Maya Ray, will you please come get your load out of the dryer? And then my question is interrupted by her saying, yeah, Mom, on it. Wait a second. You know, she's in a different room, like, yeah, whatever. And then 3 days later, and I'm just exasperated, holding it in, thinking to myself, why do I even bother? Meaning, why did I bother asking when here I am needing to get it out of the dryer? Because yeah, I needed to use it and she wasn't there to do it. So, and so then when we did the panels exercise, when we had 2 non-traditional shaped panels, I went for a circle. And it's kind of like, you know, like that tension between parent and child, well, specifically a teen child. And we kind of like had our backs lined up to each other, even though we weren't physically together. And so I did the text part, you know, zigzag here with me, and then her text part with her zigzagged also, but we're clearly separated and not speaking to each other. And so I'm just kind of talking to myself, parenting is hard. And then she's off by herself thinking, oh, Mom is always bugging. And then with the one where we did 3 continual with no gutter at all, I had the idea of 1 rectangle. and but 3 panels, and I did them like a puzzle piece. So if you can see that line, it's like a puzzle. And so I time limit, so I just went for like morning, midday, and evening. And so this one is just good morning with the sun coming up behind the mountain. Great day for a hike. I'm trudging up the mountain, and then I came back down, and I live on the Rio Grande River, so there's the sunset. And then for the main attraction, what I chose was no gutters, no visible characters, no dialogue, just all thought. And so I did 5 panels, and I set aside the thought bubbles in yellow. And the background filler is kind of like, well, it has everything to do with the theme of the topic is emotional intelligence. And so all of the fillers are representing, some kind of emotion. So in the first thought bubble, the character is off thinking, I didn't know any different, so I thought it was normal not to cry, meaning I was encouraged to hold crying in and not show emotion when I was a kid. And so then the next thought bubble, they made fun of me if I got upset or showed any emotion. And so this is inside of me just being frustrated. I never thought about how I felt. So I never knew how I felt. And then these represent cracks in my emotional intelligence opening up. That changed when I moved out and I went to college. And then there's flowers here, meaning blossoming. What did she mean when she asked me, ... do you have emotions? And then hearts.
Oh, that's so great. I love the kind of like lexicon of like different kinds of shapes as kind of guiding you through that kind of amazing text. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of what to draw. And then I was like, oh, fill it with some kind of, emotional imagery. So anyway, thanks for a great evening.
Thank you, Jessica. We've got 3 more shares, but they're all off camera. VDR, Kendall, and Deb, whoever comes on camera first. Ooh, not everybody came on camera. Okay, let's go to Kendall, and then VDR, and then Deb, and then we'll call it a night. Hey, Kendall.
Hello. Thanks, Yasmeen, for running this awesome workshop. It was super fun. I guess the first thing I want to show is just like the panel exercise. I feel like I always use square panels, so like the thought of using just different shaped panels was really cool. I made like a pretty simple comic about love, and so the first panel, I'm sitting on a heart-shaped bed and I'm just like thinking about love, and then the second panel, there's a sword just sort of impaling, and it's just like yikes, it hurts. And so I was thinking about the composition, and I was like, oh, I want the other heart to sort of be heartbreak, and I was like, let me make a sword sort of like bisect the panel and then sort of break the shape of the actual panel. So I was like, oh, okay, it was like a nice to think about.
We can't see the bottom panel though. It was too low. Can you?
It was on panels. It was literally just like a 2 hearts.
Okay.
What's below is just like another exercise. So it's like literally just the 2 hearts.
I like the inverse of them together too. So.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
And then I want the actual exercise was just I actually did a thing without gutters, and so I just wanted it to be a series of me sort of just thinking about something. So it was like a tiny little poem that I wrote that was just like, make it up, shut it down, thinking after, you're a clown, get it right, turn around. And it's just like me turning around. So that's it.
I love the colors. And it's really good to see you. I miss you in the Bay. Thanks for coming.
You too. I miss you too.
Can I just say, Kendall, I love the way you use color, and in the exercise and what you just showed, the emotion really comes through. Really. Very nicely done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I love that. Thanks.
VDR, VCR, then Deb.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm really so I My comic is kind of different because I did all my warm-ups through the whole page. So what I did was I squeezed them all in like in one page. This is the first two. These are the first two panels with speech bubbles. But the way I write the dialogue is that I start the sentence from bottom to up. If you can read it. First panel I write bottom to up and I add the soft bubble just on top like it's the last sentence or second to last sentence. And I didn't think of shapes at all. I think it's triangles and rectangles. And I start another part of this conversation. My character under is supposed to be the first one to ask, really? And she becomes last, but then she's shown on the above of the panel, like, yeah. And I squeeze this little like emotions on the two characters. I did like kind of like 5 or 6 square and rectangle panels without a gap, and I thought it'd be cool. The way I write the sentences went back to the way it was, and characters are like are zoomed out, and this character. Hold on a second. And my character is asking me a question under, and she answers on top instead of being saving the bottom. And she's glowing, and she has stars glowing, and it feels like an annoyance. And my last panel, to think of it, so all I can think of is creating my own like scenario or perspective being transition. This is them in the far perspective. This is the front perspective. And the last one is just showing bubbles and only the faces, and the background is off.
Yeah, I love that it's all one page. That's really, really smart. And those drawings at the bottom of them, kind of like doing stuff together, is really, really, those are great drawings.
Thanks. I
Wow.
really think of background, so all I draw is grass.
I do it too, so we're doing the same thing.
That was amazing. Thank you for sharing. And finally, Deb, did I remember to unmute you? Good.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, I don't know. We can see this here, but this is all I did for the evening. But I'm very proud of myself because I usually come to these things and don't share. But I love breaking rules. And so it's kind of a collaboration of all the stuff as we went through. And then I just started doodling and going over lines. So it says, I'm so tired, which I am. And then the other character is like, stop complaining. And I'm saying, it's just a thought.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad that you shared. I love the kind of drawings of the kind of black space at the end. It kind of like evokes that.
Well, yeah, that was my most fun part.
Yeah, I can tell.
Like
I feel like
getting rid of the lines and making lines and just playing. I
Yeah.
like to play.
Yeah.
Make me happy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kudos for sharing, Deb. Well, we went into really overtime tonight. But it's a tradition. Everybody can unmute themselves and thank Yasmeen for a really great workshop. This was fantastic, Yasmeen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Yasmeen.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really good.
Thank you,
Very nice.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Keep making
Too.
comments.
Bye.
This was really fun. My only regret is that I couldn't draw along because the ADD, I just can't do the multitasking.
Well, you can, do the assignments later.
Yeah, I will.
And we'd like to see them, Michael, later.
That, I hope I didn't make you feel self-conscious goody hop, but I do that all the time. And I apologize. It's
No, you
like,
have nothing to apologize for. It was something I needed to hear because when I started, I was like proud of the first comic, and then when I was looking at it again, like I have to share it, I was like, I can't do it.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm glad that you shared that, Michael. I feel the same way. Even when I was doing it with you guys, I was like, what am I gonna do? You know? So
I don't know that it ever goes away. I think that you can build up tolerance for it and just notice, oh, that's my inner critic,
mhm.
you know, and a lot of people feel that way. And I also wonder if it isn't, if you're bullied when you're young, you habitually try to beat others to the punch, and denigrate yourself before you let anybody else do it. But you know
Yeah.
you have
I
nothing
think
to
that's definitely a
apologize
part of
for.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was important that you shared that, Michael, because I think other people will take comfort and be aware of it. So I'm glad you shared the concept of, you know, overcome, your critic. And I think you always want to keep the high quality in your mind. In other words, you want to do the best you can, but you take pride at that stage of your career, and you will get better as time goes on. But I never make fun of my stuff from before. I say that's the best I could do at that time. But I think
Yeah,
your
that's
words
true.
were important.
That's true. The other thing I had to train myself is when somebody likes something I do, I just say thank you. I used to try to talk them out of liking what I did and point out everything that's wrong. And I try to keep that to myself. And if so, I want people to like my stuff. I don't know why. I do exactly what you did, Buddy How. I don't mean to, make you feel self-conscious, but I relate to that issue so much.
Well,
Yeah,
you're
no,
right
that's
to
my
say
fault.
just thank you, because if you say no, it's no good, then you're telling the other person that their opinion doesn't have merit. And
Yeah,
I know
that's
I
also
know
true.
what's behind it. You want to point out where you think you didn't do as well, but you're right. Just say thank you and just let it go, because then they'll want to encourage and say it to you again when you do another good piece.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, life is tough.
yeah. And I think for me, partly it's because I had a hypercritical father, so I think I internalized that parent, that
Mhm.
nothing is good enough. You should do better. You should, anyway,
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
sorry. Yeah,
no, I think that's all great things to share. I think it's important. I think like ultimately, like one thing that can help with that kind of critical inner voice is all of the kind of people in your community that are cheering you on. Those can be the kind of voices that cheer you on in your head as you go, because those can drown out that one negative voice. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks again, Yasmeen. This is great.
You
Weekend.
too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.